Ngā mihi and welcome to Tower Sector Report, featuring the second part of our special investigation into the future of New Zealand's fresh water, how we store it, irrigate with it and satisfy environmental demands while dairy farming and other forms of land use become ever more intensive. Our correspondent Drew Chappell travels to South Canterbury to talk to the owners of a poster boy for water storage and distribution, the Opuha Dam. The dam services 16,000 hectares of South Canterbury farmland and is owned by 235 local shareholders, with water quality among the purest in the nation. Also in today's program, I talked to MAF Deputy Director General Paul Stocks about the Ministry's latest annual Situation and Outlook for New Zealand Agriculture and Forestry. And I also talked to the woman who heads up one of our major banks, Barbara Chapman, CEO of the ASB Bank, who's keen to get a much bigger slice of the rural pie. But first up, let's hear from a very optimistic Paul Stocks as he analyses MAF's annual Situation and Outlook report. Well, Paul, welcome to Sector Report here at Field Days. We're using our special studio, which explains a bit of the background noise as the crowds wander past, and quite often they're stopping to have a look and a listen to see what we're up to. Now, this dreadful acronym, SONZAF, Situation and Outlook for New Zealand Agriculture and Forestry, just out in the last day or two. Can you summarise the overview that's come out of this? I mean, it does look like agribusiness in this country is has a pretty bright outlook. Well,
I think this is probably one of the most positive reviews we've done. We release this report every year, look across the primary sectors, agriculture, forestry, horticulture, viticulture, and see what the situation is and what our forecasts will be for the future. Yeah. It's been a really good year for the primary sectors in New Zealand, and that really means a really good year for New Zealand.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. You've revised your price forecasts upwards for our exports. What factors have driven that upward revision? Well, we're seeing,
I think, really good demand for primary commodities across the board. Now, we saw them in 2008 as well, but there was more of a price spike or bubble there. We're expecting that with the growing and emerging affluent middle classes, particularly in Asia Pacific, with demand for food and fibre, the kind of products that New Zealand produces are going to continue to be in demand, and we're seeing that, and it's being supported by prices.
But our strong dollar, though, it can't be doing us any favours, can it?
Well, it's in some ways it's a bit of a natural hedge. The fact that we're largely a primary producing nation, which means that when our economy is going well, our dollar tends to be high, which does, I
wonder why that is.
Because the markets are looking at how the economy is going. The markets price that into the dollar. If the economy is going gangbusters on the back of the primary sectors, they're going to price the dollar higher. So that mutes the returns in New Zealand dollars to producers. On the other hand, it means that prices of things like fuel and fertiliser are lower than they would otherwise be.
Now, can we go through the report, sector by sector, and hear from you what MAF has found and is forecasting? So let's start with dairy.
Okay. Well, I suppose just stepping back for a moment, because there's one of the big issues for agriculture is, of course, the weather, and this impacted across all the sectors. You recall around Christmas time we thought we were going to have droughts across the country, and that was going to constrain production. Thank God we got the rains through, and that's impacted across all production. So starting with dairy, actually it's been a pretty good season despite the droughts. 4% growth this year. We're forecasting another 4% growth in volumes next year. Prices, everyone knows prices are doing very, very well.
But so is production, it would seem. I mean, apparently pasture growth is almost ideal,
well, it's been a brilliant autumn, a very good autumn. And it's quite cold here today, but generally the weather's been very conducive to growth of grass, and therefore the milk production. A little bit of a warning, what we tend to see is every time prices get very good for dairy, people like the United States come into the market, and supply gets turned on, and the price comes back down again. So my advice to farmers is don't bank on the current payouts for the next 5 years. Don't do all your planning on that. Plan for a more of a long run average price.
Right, okay. How's forestry doing?
Forestry's had an exceptional year. I think we were about 25 million cubic metres harvested this year. That's a record. That's 19% up on last year's harvesting. So we've got very strong demand coming out of China. and we've got timber going in both as logs and as timber for construction, for furniture, for packaging. We're forecasting, in fact, the GDP forecast for China next year are 9% and 8% for India. So you can see that that market is very hot.
The meat and wool sector, how's that performing?
We'll start with sheep. We had the spring storms coming through that reduced production a bit this year. I think we're about 7% down. But prices have been very good, both for meat and for wool. And in fact, for wool, we're now over $5 a kilo, and it's been a while since we've managed that.
You're talking strong wool?
Yes, yes. So that's a really good news story. Long may it continue. I think the meat and wool production, the co-production of that is actually really, really important. There's a worldwide reduction in sheep production, both in New Zealand and in the European Union. So that's going to continue to support prices for some time, I think, if we can maintain demand. Beef. Beef. Beef prices have been very good, particularly manufacturing beef into the US, and as you know, that's a combination of our beef market plus dairy cull. The US downturn has meant that things like hamburgers are becoming very much more preferred food for the United States, and that's the kind of beef that we supply into them. We did have a reduction in volume this year because the early drought reduced carcass weight, but overall prices are good. And again, we've got good forecasts for the future there. South America is coming on stream with beef production, but I think our markets are good.
Yeah, they're really our big competitors, I guess. Now, finally, and just very briefly, if we could, staying with red meat, you head up that section on meat under issues facing the primary sectors by asking, can the red meat sector compete with others rather than itself? What did the report writers mean by that?
Well, the report was commissioned by Beef and Lamb and Meat Industry Association, and we supported it. But look, I think everyone in the sector knows that it's a sector with fierce competition, and fierce competition domestically for procurement and supply. And I think what the report writers were saying is that's all well and good, but actually when we're in a market we shouldn't be competing against ourselves, we should be competing against our other competitors. And to the extent that we can get a bit more integration in the domestic side between suppliers and processors, and a bit more cooperation, I think that's going to result in increased profits for New Zealand firms.
Well, let's hope that will indeed happen. Well, Paul, thank you very much for your time here at Field Days today, and I appreciate it. A little bit of noise there from the lot of kids through here today. So
it's Friday.
There's a bit of noise towards, and it is indeed, it's Friday. So, thanks very much for your time today.
Thanks, John.
Okay. That was Paul Stocks, Deputy Director General of MAF there. And if you heard a bit of background noise, it was because that interview was done at our special studio at this year's National Field Days. So people were stopping by to have a look at what we were up to. After the break, Drew Chappell takes us into the future of our plentiful fresh water.
It falls from the sky, runs down our mountains and through our lakes, making life on Earth possible. Water has been described as our most precious resource, and historically, New Zealand hasn't had much trouble finding enough to go around. Through the 20th century, as a predominantly sheep farming nation, our agricultural demands on freshwater sources rarely caused concern. In the past 30 years, however, demand for water has soared along with the diversification and intensification of farming systems. As cows and crops multiply, so does farming's thirst for water. In response to this, and to the decreasing effectiveness of 1991's Resource Management Act, early this year the government announced a raft of changes to the way freshwater storage and allocation will be funded and governed.
As part of the budget announcement during May, we've made that announcement. We have delivered a national policy statement on water, both quantity and quality. That'll give very strong direction now to regional councils as to where their responsibility lies. We're going to take more time to work through the other recommendations, and we'll be coming back with suggestions later on. That work may well take the rest of this year and some of next year.
It's an attempt to boost the effectiveness of current irrigation schemes, which face numerous regulatory and biosecurity hurdles, as well as giving funding to possible future projects run by and for farming communities. That's money set aside for the development of projects just like this one. Here in South Canterbury, the Opua Dam has been cited by farming, environmental and irrigation groups alike as a great example of how a coordinated approach can benefit rural communities, and not just farmers. Around 15 minutes drive from Fairlie, the Opua Dam provides water to more than 16,000 hectares of Canterbury pasture and horticultural land, providing a literal shot in the arm for the local economy. Opua Dam CEO Tony McCormick has only been in the job for a few months, but he's inherited a veritable blue jewel in the nation's irrigation crown. He says in a project the scale of this one, all stakeholders must play a part right from the planning stage.
One of the key things was right from the start of Opua, the environmental requirements were put foremost, actually, and they still remain at the forefront. All the water in the dam, 50% of it is actually allocated to environmental flows, and right from the start that was the provision, if you like, of the development of the scheme. It's essentially an augmentation scheme, so it works by augmenting the rivers so that the irrigators can continue or can go about their business. So the key thing is about, well, recovering and maintaining the health of those rivers.
He says the reliable supply of fresh water to farms has been a fillip for the region's economy, encouraging farming expansion and attracting new investments.
They've sort of come off the back of that agricultural development. I mean, South Canterbury, it wasn't existing, it was an agricultural centre. We did have the sub-schemes, or one of them, down on Levels Plain, a lot of cropping and produce sort of development there, so a lot of industries on the back of that were there, but what it's enabled them to do is just flourish, really. There's a whole lot more gone up there, down in Washdyke and around Timaru, those support processing industries that have just blossomed since the scheme's become that much more reliable and the productivity's increased.
One of those farmers looking to expand is Michael Taylor, who grows more than 800 hectares of cereals, wheat, ryegrass and barley near Temuka. He says for farmers like him, the difference between irrigated and non-irrigated pasture is as wide as flood and famine.
We'd probably look at another 2.5 tonnes of wheat per hectare with water, which equates dollar-wise to around $800 to $1,000 a hectare. With vegetable crops, that difference is greater again. In fact, you wouldn't grow a lot of vegetable crops without water.
Michael Taylor says Opua's service has allowed him and others to grow their operations without fear of the fickle nature of Canterbury's weather.
It just means we can grow a bigger range of crops. In the past, we were limited with water, probably the reliability of water. The key to any irrigation scheme is the reliability, and the Opua Dam has given us that reliability. It means that our water's there when we need it.
The Opua development may be a success story the government can point to as an example of how irrigation can work for and with small communities which rely so heavily on water. It can't, however, claim it as an example of a publicly funded success. Opua was established and bankrolled privately and receives no government backing. Tony McCormick says they are proud of their independence, but it's not practical for all regions.
Opua was fortunate, as I say, it had some cornerstone financiers that hung in there, attracted or encouraged others to invest, and then they've backed out. And the scheme is now completely owned by the farmers. Government cornerstone shareholders or investors no longer exist, but they were imperative in getting it up, and that's what I see the government is now able to do by providing that seed investment, or the encouragement investment, I guess you'd call it, that it will attract other investors. So very important.
The dam continues to be profitable, generating electricity, providing fresh water to the community, and giving holidaymakers a huge space in which to swim and fish. It does all this seemingly without compromising the surrounding environment, something which Bill English said at the Federated Farmers AGM would be compulsory in order for any new scheme to be approved public funds.
What the New Zealand public would expect, that any government participation will lift the environmental standards, not drop them. And that's a more general argument ahead of us and that is with the expansion of our production systems, the public need to feel reasonably comfortable that the farming community and the government as an investor, if it is one, understands the balance they want to see around issues like water quality.
The Archimedes principle states that any object, when placed in water, displaces its own weight and volume, nature's way of keeping equilibrium between land and water. In this country, nature no longer provides all that we need in order to keep a balance between the economy and the environment, and so it's up to us to decide where that balance stands. Is the money from our exports worth more than the money from our clean, green tourism campaigns? Or is there a way we can have our cake and eat it too? The feeling among most we've spoken to along the way seems to be yes, although the ideal route may still elude us.
The issue of balance is a worry for a lot of people because no one ever defines it. It's a term that politicians love to use, but no one ever defines it, and from our point of view it tends to be a bit of a one-way trip. Invariably environment loses and industry interests gain. You mentioned the tourism interest angle. That's the New Zealand brand, and that is critically important to New Zealand, and environmental interests and agriculture need the 100% pure brand. It's our one unique marketing opportunity, and sadly in our view the current national policy statement squanders an opportunity to make the most of that and actually put some serious integrity behind it.
Water's a controversial thing obviously, but I think at the end of the day, if it's done right and everybody's got some input into it, I think it could be a benefit for everybody.
Welcome back. You're about to meet a rarity in banking in this country, a female CEO, Barbara Chapman of ASB Bank. And while the ASB has had a relatively low-key rural presence, Barbara plans to change all that. Well, Barbara, welcome to the Sector Report program here on Country 99 TV at Field Days, where I see our breath is hitting the air, so it is a little nippy this morning, isn't it? Now, you're a very rare creature, a woman heading up a bank. You're probably sick of being asked this question, but was it hard to break through the old glass ceiling? I mean, it may not be true, but banking is certainly always seen as a traditionally male stronghold.
I think historically that has been the case, but increasingly there are women coming through the financial services sector, actually probably more so here in New Zealand than in other parts of the world. But it's a great privilege to be the CEO of a bank in New Zealand, and for me it's been a real homecoming back to New Zealand, so I'm really delighted to get the role. Where have you been in the interim? I've spent 5 years at the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, which is ASB's parent company, over there doing a range of things, so it's great to be back here in New Zealand now. Yeah. So you were based in Sydney, which I think is where their head office is. Yes, I was based in Sydney working for Ralph Norris for 5 years. Yes, right. And of course, he himself was a former head of ASB. That's right. Yeah. Now, you've got to the top by taking a fairly untraditional route, marketing and human resources rather than finance. Was that background a handicap for you? I think it's been an advantage because in those types of roles you do get a good understanding of how people inside your business work, and you get a good understanding of the market. But also, I mean, I've been involved in retail banking and I've been involved running Sovereign, our life insurance firm, so I've had quite a broad experience to get me to this role. Yeah. So the lack of being a hard-nosed money person doesn't necessarily hold you back. Well, I've certainly got a great finance team around me giving me a lot of support, so I'm really pleased with the help that they provide to me. Now, what's ASB's market share for rural lending? We're reasonably what I would describe as underweight in rural lending. I'd like to get a little bit bigger. You've got to remember we grew up as a savings bank based in Auckland, so our origins are slightly different to many of our competitors, and therefore our business mix is slightly different. So rural is something we're focusing on. We've been up and running in the rural sector since about 1993, and we're growing, and I'd like to see us grow even more. So really, once you ceased to be the Auckland Savings Bank and became the ASB, that's when you spread your wings a bit, I guess, and got out of town. Yes, we moved out of Auckland and spread ourselves around New Zealand, and in fact we're still growing our branch network outside of Auckland. We put in 7 new branches last year and about another 6 this year. So from that moment on we diversified into rural, we diversified more into commercial, and we moved out of Auckland, so it's been great for our expansion.
quite a learning curve for you too, I guess, particularly adapting to long-established banking traditions in rural New Zealand.
Well, that's right, because if you think about our origins in Auckland and Northland, they were largely around savings bank type business. So the rural economy was different and new for us, but we've got a great team of people, and many of them have been here since the start, since we set it up. So we're really feeling very comfortable in this sector now.
Can we expect to see some more vigorous marketing, I guess, aimed specifically at country clients?
Well, certainly I think our edge into the rural sector is through our people.
Yeah.
And we stand for innovation, we stand for great customer service, so more and more you're going to see our people out there delivering the kind of service that we expect from them into that community.
But what sort of marketing techniques would you use, do you think, to get to those farming clients?
It's a relationship business, so it's more about people. It's more about getting out there and talking to them than it is about glitzy marketing type initiatives.
Yes.
But obviously places here, like at Field Days, it's wonderful for us to have a really good presence here. We welcome all our customers here, and we welcome non-customers too to come and have a chat to us. So this kind of thing's really important to us.
What sort of interest is there in your exhibit here at the Field Days?
Look, it's been really good. We've just come from a breakfast where we hosted our customers who are here today, and we've got a wonderful stand, and people can come in for a barbecue for lunch if they want to, customers and non-customers. But it's just a good opportunity for our team to talk more casually with their customers and with
What sort of
new
questions
people.
are people asking you?
Well, they're asking us about what kinds of services we can offer. So we're a broad-based financial services company, so we can bring specialists to the table to come and talk to farmers. We're doing interesting things out in the community as well. For example, we've had St John, who we're a partner with, going onto farms, into wool sheds, onto paddocks, and doing safety training and CPR training. So we can bring a wide range of things because of the breadth of our business.
That's a very good idea, actually. First aid is pretty important on the farm.
It is, and St John is such a great partner to help us do that. So, we're going to do more of those.
Right. So, I guess the way I've written this question before the interview was hooking farmers in. What kind of patter do you use when you're trying to get people on board?
Look, it's a relationship business, so it's not about anything like that. But before I came along today, I had a look at some of the research, what farmers are telling us about our business and what makes us different. And it was really interesting to see. It's about things like good value for money, about being easy to deal with, and giving quality advice at the right time. It's those kinds of things that our farming customers are looking for. Those are the sorts of things we need to provide.
I guess a few farmers, not a few actually, would say, yeah, but we can get that from the other banks too.
Well, I'd like to challenge people to have a look at our service and our innovation, because we are the #1 in customer service in New Zealand, and I think it stands us apart.
Now, there are some very high debt levels among some farmers, mainly in dairying. Around 20% are considered to have serious problems. Would you look to refinancing some of these farmers if you're satisfied they could manage their debt once they're on your books?
Look, I think it's difficult to generalise, because yes, there are farmers out there with high levels of debt, but many of them are coping with those levels of debt extremely well. And very successful farmers with high levels of debt we are interested in. So it really is a case-by-case, individual type basis.
Yeah. Well, farming is in a pretty good space at the moment with virtually every sector. Even strong wool is doing well. What's your crystal ball telling you? Are these prices here to last?
Well, we think so. We think that overall the future of the sector is looking exceptionally strong. Probably the one spot that we'd be looking at is in the red meat sector, where production overseas might actually soak up some of the demand, so we might get into an excess supply situation, but that's a way out.
Yeah.
So certainly for now, New Zealand, being the backbone of the food production of the world, it's in a very, very good spot.
Yeah. And of course the commodities boom will be an important aspect of your decision making. I mean, are the high prices for our products driving your move to a greater presence in rural banking?
Look, certainly. I mean, we've been in rural banking since 1993, and we look at it as a long-term venture rather than something that's just a moment in time when prices are high, we're jumping in. It's not like that at all. You've got to be here for the long haul. It's a relationship business.
Now, finally and very briefly, turnover in farm sales is very low at the moment. Do you see this as an opportunity for you, for financing people onto farms?
Look, we're certainly looking for those sorts of opportunities. So, we're very keen to talk to people who might be looking for a different type of banking relationship.
Yeah, because quite a few farmers are finding it hard to raise the finance. So I guess they'll be pleased to hear that from you. Barbara, thank you very much for your time here at Field Days today.
Thanks, John.
Barbara Chapman, the ASB CEO there. And that winds up our show for this week. Remember though, you can catch up with Tower Sector Report on our website. See you next time.